These lights are so bright in my eyes that I can't see too many people out there. But I can only see the black ones. I can't see any white ones, you see. We've all seen the mugshot. And you know who embraced it more than anybody else? The black population. It's incredible. You see black people walking around with my mugshot. You know, they do shirts and they sell them for $19 a piece. It's pretty amazing.
I'll admit it makes me uncomfortable to play that, but because we're 5 months out from an election that's too close for comfort, people need to see him. Nobody says, nobody believes, know what he says to people he wants to vote for him. Because it's amazing that those words come out of the mouth of someone who was one of our two choices, to be president of the United States in 2024. And of course, there's always more. Stop me if you heard someone accused of being a racist before saying this. He said he has many black friends. That's his defense when asked how he responds to black voters or others who call him a racist. This is what he told Semaphore in an interview out today. Quote, "I have so many black friends that if I were a racist, they wouldn't be my friends. They would know better than anybody in FAST." We're back with the Rev and Andrew. Rev, I'll ask you two questions. One, how do we process this? And two, how do we cover this?
I think that we cover it by the record. I think that we should not bite the bait of having to prove Donald Trump is a racist. I think clearly I've known Donald Trump. I've marched on him, and then he tried to be friendly. He's come to my convention. I believe he's a racist, but that's not what we have to prove. Just look at his record. He has always race baited. He started with the Central Park five innocent young men in New York. He called for the death penalty. Well, has he ever called for the death penalty for anybody else? His political career started by saying a black man was not a real American. He was born in Kenya. Birtherism. Has he questioned even Joe Biden's birthplace? I mean, everything about race, he's always race baited against blacks. So all you got to do is look at his record. And I've said to any of those that support him, show me where he was on the right side of any race issue. We forget. This is the man that said when we saw the march in Charlottesville, where they were saying things to protect a Confederate statue, Robert E. Lee, and saying anti-Semitic things, he said they're firing people on both sides. He was the president, sitting in the White House, president, during George Floyd, probably the biggest race case of our time. What did he say about George Floyd? Oh, I'm sorry. He had them clear the protesters from in front of the church, held up a Bible, and condemned the protesters. Never even tried to say anything about police reform. So if the record is, Sotomayor said it about the other kid, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. I believe he's a racist, but you don't have to believe that. Just believe you're against one that's always on the wrong side of racial policies and racial legislation. And I don't believe everybody that votes for him is a racist, but I believe every racist votes for Donald Trump.
What do you make of their very deliberate, very public strategy to talk about really running up Trump's numbers amid black voters in 24?
I think the strategy is that he wants to, in a tight election, try to just get some more black votes or dissuade blacks from voting, and that he feels is enough to get him over the hump, which is why I think that the Biden people have to really invest in a counter argument, because you can't take that for granted. And, you know, now he's going to a black church in Detroit. He went to the Bronx. And if you notice the crowd in the Bronx, he imported a crowd. He could even import a lot of blacks, and only blacks he put on stage was two indicted rappers. I mean, which, you know, he probably should get lessons from them on how to handle that. But for him to say, when we've spent generations telling our kids, this is Father's Day Sunday, to do the right thing, follow the law, do what is right, for him to say that we are in some way synonymous with mugshots, he didn't say some blacks, he said the black population identified with it, because that's who we are, criminals, thugs. That's what he thinks of us. For him to say that, imagine if Barack Obama had said that about whites. Imagine if anybody had said that about any other race, but he gets away with it in the name
Why?
of he has swagger. I think he gets away with it because we're not calling it straight out what it is. This is not even dog whistling. This is straight out saying, I'm playing to racism. And Donald Trump has done that when he got away with birtherism, where people wouldn't call it what it was, because all that was saying he's not one of us. When he got away with that, he takes the next step, he takes the next step. One thing you've seen in his trials, Nicole, when we've seen it in civil court now, he's gone through 2 or 3 there, and Andrew's going through the criminal trial. You've not seen one black business person come into court and accuse him of giving them a deal. Not one. How do you be in business 40 years in New York, which is 2/3 black and Latino, and everybody you did business with was white?
It's hard.
Unless you are clearly not one that wants to deal with diversity and how you do your business.
It's an important conversation. We got to keep an eye on it. Thank you. In one fell swoop, the United States Supreme Court knocked down one of just a teeny little handful of steps made by the federal government in recent years to address the deadly scourge of gun violence in America. The court opening the floodgates now to the spread of a tool that made possible the deadliest mass shooting in our country's history. In a 6-3 decision that splits on ideological lines, the nation's highest court eliminated a ban on bump stocks. Now, bump stock is an accessory that makes a deadly weapon, a semi-automatic rifle, if you can imagine this, even deadlier. Bump stocks were banned by the Trump administration after a lone gunman perched on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Resort in Las Vegas, armed to the teeth with semi-automatic rifles, outfitted them with bump stocks, and then rained bullets down on a crowd of 22,000 people who were there to enjoy a concert. Amid panic and confusion, many people didn't even realize what was happening. He murdered 60 people and injured more than 500 more in a series of rapid-fire bursts of gunfire made possible by bump stocks. This was that scene.
They're not real bump stocks. What is it? I don't know.
What it is bump stock amplified semi-automatic rifles firing into a crowd of people. And today, the Supreme Court allowed for that kind of carnage to take place again. Writing for the majority, Justice Clarence Thomas said that the federal government overreached when it used a nearly 100-year-old law banning machine guns to ban bump stocks. Because, he writes, a semi-automatic rifle equipped with a bump stock does not meet the technical definition of a machine gun, which is banned. Or, as Justice Sotomayor put it, it does not meet the majority's tortured, contrived definition of a machine gun. In a scathing dissent that she read from the bench to underscore her exasperation and frustration with the decision, Justice Sotomayor says, quote, today, the court puts bump stocks back in civilian hands. To do so, it casts aside Congress's definition of a machine gun and seizes upon one that is inconsistent with the ordinary meaning of the statutory text and unsupported by context or purpose. When I see a bird that walks like a duck, swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, I call that bird a duck. A bump stock equipped semi-automatic rifle fires automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger. Because I, like Congress, call that a machine gun, I respectfully dissent. Today's decision to reject that ordinary understanding will have deadly consequences. Those deadly consequences are where we start today with some of our favorite experts and friends. Senior editor for Slate, host of the Amicus podcast, Dahlia Lithwick, is here, plus former top prosecutor at DOJ and MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's back with us at the table. Author and New York Times bestselling books Columbine and Parkland, Birth of a Movement. Dave Cullen is back with us, and the host of Politics Nation here on MSNBC, president of the National Action Network, the Reverend Al Sharpton's here. Dave, I read, we reported earlier this week that the Newtown class of kids who were in first grade graduated this year. And just to think of how much of our adult lives, and for those high school graduates, their entire childhoods are now shaped by these searing national tragedies of mass shootings, and that we choose to continue to live like this makes this decision extraordinary.
It does. And, the reason the Parkland kids rose up so quickly and powerfully is because they were born to this. Well, they went to kindergarten. They were already having the drills. And they were so angry and so fed up. And they were waiting it to happen to their school. So when it happened, they were ready and they went for it. And, it's just astounding. I'm sure Andrew and some of the others can speak to this very well, and Dana. But, Delia, this is so historic because the first major gun legislation, the biggest we ever had, were the two in the 1930s, I believe in 33 and 38, where it was specifically in response to Al Capone and the gangster era, the Tommy gun and the machine guns, that they did this. So it was the first and most important thing Congress ever addressed was the machine gun. And nearly a century later, the 6 politicians on the Supreme Court repealed that act out of nowhere. And, the great thing for them is, they don't have to get the president's signature. There's no veto. They can just do it by fiat, so they're a dictator of 6 to pass whatever legislation they want. And this is just astounding.
And just so it isn't lost on anybody, so that people understand what they did today, I really do want to show people what a bump stock is. I want to try to illuminate what Justice Sotomayor wrote in her dissent. Watch this.
So watch here as my hand pulls forward on the barrel of the gun. This brings the trigger up to my stationary trigger finger. My finger never moves, but still connects with the trigger due to the forward motion of the gun. The gun then fires, and the recoil brings the gun back to my stationary finger over and over, causing the trigger to be pulled again and again, very quickly, until I run out of ammo. Accuracy is severely compromised, but accuracy isn't really the point of full auto. Here's the semi-auto firing rate one more time. My finger was pulling the trigger manually. And here it is again, with the currently fully legal bump stock installed on the AR-15.
It struck me in covering the Trump trial that the world is watching, and I think this is the thing that makes the world feel differently about tourism, feel differently about work visas, feel differently about student visas, feel differently about the mind of the people living in a country that think that that's necessary.
Right. When I do interviews after these horrible things, I do a lot of U.S. and then abroad, and they're completely different. Like the opening questions from UK, Australia, anywhere in the world, Africa, it always starts out with some version of what the hell is wrong with you people? Why haven't you done something about guns yet? And they're astounded and they can't believe this. And now we just took a huge step backwards, not just forwards. And by the way, watching that, I served in the U.S. infantry, and we had on our M16s, it had both a semi-automatic mode, and then you could flip this little switch, and it became a machine gun, an automatic machine gun. And that looks just like what we did with flipping that switch. I was so glad to hear Justice Sotomayor say that about walking like a duck, because that was my first response. And at first I thought, well, I'm not an expert in mechanics or, guns. Maybe I'm wrong. And then I read that and I was kind of thinking well, sometimes it helps to be just a civilian. So you can look at it and say, this is obviously a machine gun. And from somebody who's fired a machine gun in the infantry, it's quite obvious. And I'm glad she said they're tortured logic, because they had to invent this ridiculous thing to say machine guns are okay now, or a way to, technology figured out a way to recreate machine guns. And they said, okay, it's fine to have machine guns.
Andrew Weissman, let me show you what Jamie Raskin said about what the Supreme Court is up to on this front.
The Supreme Court has been on a rampage with respect to the ability of states and localities to pass reasonable gun safety measures. And they turn the rhetoric of originalism on and off according to their ideological purposes. So, nobody is saying that the flint stock musket is the only protected weapon, because that's what existed in the 18th century. The NRA has succeeded in poisoning reasonable public debate about this. 90% of Americans want to see a violent criminal background check and want to close the loopholes in the Brady legislation so that people can't get firearms online or get firearms at a private gun show without going through a background check. And yet, you know, the Supreme Court is driving everything in the wrong direction.
Yeah, we cover the crisis at the Supreme Court in terms of the public's faith in it. It's sort of a tortured braid of ethics lapses and decisions that are so far out of the mainstream. The ban on bump stocks was a Trump administration policy.
So I think it's very hard to look at this and not just get increasingly cynical about the Supreme Court. I mean, I try very hard to be thinking about, well, is there some rational argument for the majority here? And it's very hard to see, because you sit there and say, okay, you have to concede that the Sotomayor dissent is at least, that it's a rational view that the executive branch could take of this law. In other words, like, let's assume the sort of best case, reasonable minds could differ. This could be viewed as fitting within the definition of a machine gun. And maybe some people would disagree. And that's where the court is, they're not in the legislature. They're not in the executive branch. And it really comes down to sort of who on God's green earth do they think they are? This was a decision that either Congress has made or that the White House has made, and it is a reasonable one. And it is impossible to see this other than through the lens of the Second Amendment, and because they want to see the Second Amendment and anything that would interfere with even the right to bear a machine gun, which, by the way, not in the Constitution, we are going to strike down. And that's where there's just such disrespect for the other branches of government.
Right.
And so it's just so hard to not view this through a political lens when it's just impossible to view what Justice Sotomayor wrote as being irrational. And the standard then is, so what deference is the court giving at all to either Congress or to the White House in making a reasonable restriction here on saying that, because everyone agrees machine guns could be banned. They're just trying to come up with this technicality that allows it to not be here. And it just isn't their role. And so I just think this is an example of Justice Roberts, with all due respect, who said he's here to call balls and strikes. I don't think so. That's not what was going on here.
Republicans are today scrambling to explain and excuse Donald Trump's latest mess, others pretending it didn't happen, while the people of Milwaukee woke up to this front page today. How about them apples? Trump, Milwaukee is horrible. The disgraced ex-president, the presumptive Republican nominee who desperately needs to win the state of Wisconsin, calling their city, their greatest city, horrible. And soon, 10 of these massive billboards all over their city will remind them of what Trump said about them over and over. It's not only an insult to the more than 500,000 people who live in Milwaukee, the city that is hosting the Republican Party's convention 1 month from tomorrow. It's also a really terrible political strategy for winning votes in a state he lost 4 years ago, and for leading a nation by picking and choosing which, if any, U.S. cities he'd contemplate supporting. Joining us now is the mayor of the great city of Milwaukee, Cavalier Johnson. Mr. Mayor, we carried your comments yesterday. First, for anyone that hasn't had the pleasure of being in Milwaukee, tell us about Milwaukee.
Oh, Milwaukee is a terrific city. It's an outstanding city on the southwestern shore of Lake Michigan. It is a city that is diverse, probably the most diverse place in the entire state of Wisconsin. There's no better place to be, I don't think, in the country than Milwaukee in the summertime. We're the city of festivals, home of Harley Davidson and Northwestern Mutual and Summerfest and Harley Fest and Bastille Days and so many wonderful, wonderful neighborhood activities that go on each and every single weekend in the summer. This is the best place to be.
Well, if you're a sports fan, I mean, there are not a lot of American cities with more to offer. I mean, tell me, too, I mean, it's actually a city with a pretty large number of Republican voters. Do I have that right?
Tens of thousands of Republicans
right.
call the city of Milwaukee home. Yeah, there are probably more as a block Republican voters here in the city of Milwaukee than any place in the state of Wisconsin. So that's why the former president's comments were kind of peculiar to me, to call the city that these folks call home a horrible place.
What do you think? I mean, yeah, I remember when he was president, I was on the air, I think, when news leaked out that he'd called a bunch of countries, he called them shithole nations. I couldn't think of an edit for that to convey what it was. And it was clear that he didn't like countries where the people, he compared it to Scandinavian countries, which he liked a whole lot. I mean, what do you think his attack on Milwaukee is about?
Well, there are some similar qualities to cities across the United States in that they are big and diverse places, right? Where people from different backgrounds, different heritages call home. So to me, regardless of what his motives were, I think it's incumbent upon all of us who live in these cities to work to make sure that he doesn't go to live in another city that he probably thinks is horrible. And that's Washington, D.C. This fall on November 5th, Election Day, which is actually my birthday. So I'm looking forward. To making sure that on the former president's birthday today, that he doesn't get a gift on my birthday.
You know, your home state is one of the battlegrounds, not just between Republicans and Democrats, but between truth and lies about the 2020 election. And I wonder how you assess sort of the enduring impact of Trump's lies about his defeat in 2020.
You know, that's the sad thing, is that here in Milwaukee and across the United States, we hold the transfer of power as something that's really, really important to us in this community and in this country. And to have somebody like Donald Trump, who's gone out and told these bold-faced lies about Milwaukee and other communities around the country, saying that there was rampant voter fraud and this and that. Now, these days, he's leading the charge to have Republican voters to do the exact same thing that was happening in 2020, mailing in ballots. The hypocrisy is thick. But here in Milwaukee, again, if there were any instances, we call those out. I would take that very seriously, and we work to make sure we have thorough and transparent elections here in this city, as we always have and will this coming election as well.
You know, saying what he said yesterday is part of a pattern on the right. You turn on the news on any day that's a bad news day for Trump, and they're usually running story after story about the crime rates in my hometown, New York City. The FBI released statistics last week that literally every category of crime, including violent crime and murders, theft, robberies, everything is down. They run against the cities as places attracting unwanted immigrants and asylum seekers and migrants. They run against the cities as being dirty and filthy. Trump uses most of those words, as do his allies in the media. What is your thought on this effort to divide not just Republicans and Democrats, but people living in cities from people living in rural communities?
Well, the fact of the matter is that there's more that unites us than separates us, right? That's true in cities like Milwaukee, as it is in other communities across the United States. I mean, here in this city, we're very likely the largest market for the Green Bay Packers in the United States of America. Not even Green Bay, but right here in Milwaukee. So I would rival the numbers that we post up for fans here in the city with any other community across the state. We like beer and cheese and all the things that folks know about Wisconsin just as much as any other community, urban or rural, across this entire state. And Milwaukee matters. Milwaukee's economy is intrinsically linked with communities all across the state. So we're all actually more connected than what our politics and what at least one politician would suggest. I call on people to work to realize that. The more we come together, the better off we will be as a country, because, there's only one flag in the United States, and all of us pledge an allegiance to it. And I think when we all come back together and understand that we're all stronger together, we'll be better as a city, as a community, as a state, and really as a country.
Mr. Mayor, do you think this hurts Trump in the state?
Well, look, again, in a place where tens of thousands of Republicans call home to say that, the place where they live is, horrible. I don't think that's a smart political move. And not just that. I mean, the former president is trying to make inroads with the African-American community. More Black people live in the city of Milwaukee than any other place in the state of Wisconsin. So this is a very, very diverse city, and elections in this state are decided on a razor's edge. And to say that Milwaukee is a horrible place, again, Milwaukee matters, not just in terms of our diversity, but our economy and in elections statewide, too. So I absolutely think that this will play out in November in the presidential race, and President Joe Biden will be reelected.
Just keep thinking of Justice Sotomayor, and I want to just put three dots out there and ask you how they are connected. I mean, I think the history of this court is being told in part through her dissents and her statements. And one is, the quote, stench of the court, not because of what it decided in Dobbs, but because of the way that case made it to the Supreme Court, the reverse engineering of the state legislature, waiting for the appointments to be confirmed and then overturning Roe. The pain she said she was in an interview up at Harvard, where she said she goes back to her office and, quote, cries sometimes. And then the walks like a duck. I mean, she is speaking to all of us. Is that intentional?
It is intentional. It's very much, I think, in the vein of what Justice Ginsburg was doing toward the end of her career, which is using these dissents as a sort of cri de coeur to, not to her colleagues. I don't think she has any hope of convincing her colleagues, but in an attempt to say to the American public, hey, are you out there? This is not appropriate. You need to be acting on this. And I just think one other thing to amplify Andrew's really smart point about this is one justice, Clarence Thomas, substituting his judgment, right, for all of the fact findings, years of thinking and working on this by ATF. And here's Clarence Thomas, and he's got some infographics, and he's got a GIF. So he pops those into the opinion as if to say, this is I'm now the expert on bump stocks, and I know more than the ATF and then Congress. And just to be super clear, these come from the gun supporters, right? These are coming directly from lobbyists who did the workaround to turn not machine guns into machine guns, and then to say, these aren't machine guns. So when Clarence Thomas at the end of this whole line of influence is like, hey, I agree, these aren't machine guns. This isn't the process working. This is the exact outcome desired by a gun industry that created a product to end run the machine gun ban and then went to the court to say, make sure the product end runs the machine gun ban. So this is not just not a court acting like not a court. This is, in fact, Justice Thomas seemingly substituting the will of the gun makers for fact-finding and government.
I came up in Republican politics when every Republican campaign was about the Supreme Court. The dog caught the car. The court is now unpopular all the way across the ideological spectrum through much of the Republican Party in America. It is now doing things that only the fringe on the right is excited and animated by. What is the political moment like, in your view, in terms of how out of step this court is on reproductive rights, on voting rights, and on gun safety?
I think that they have really pushed the envelope to where I think normal, just reasonable people are going to say enough is enough. Anyone in their right mind knows the reason that they even created bump stocks was to get around the technical definition of what a machine gun was. So now the Supreme Court is saying, yep, we're going along with that. And it's stacked by Trump supporters, Trump nominees. So you're going to deal with all kind of technicalities with anything else, but with this technicality stops everything. We're not even talking now about how harmful it can be. 60 people were killed in Las Vegas. This is not one of those, well, you don't know, Reverend, if that's going to happen. It has happened, and it happened because of a bump stop. And you are now saying, well, you don't define it right. What other definition would you give it if it was created in order to make that kind of weapon, an assault weapon, operate like a machine gun? With that bump stock in, it is a machine gun. And we're going to really argue with that when 60 families are going through Father's Day with some fathers dead, and you're going to sit and play games in the Supreme Court? This is an affront to all Americans.
I mean, you understand politics and sort of a campaign climate. I mean, do you feel like overturning a Trump-era gun safety measure is, you know, one of these things is not like the other in terms of illustrating how extreme this court is?
Well, I think that you would think that if you heard from Mr. Trump and the Republican MAGA crowd today, I think you played Raskin. I'm waiting to see where are the MAGA Republicans saying how bad this is. Where's Donald Trump? He has something to say about everything right away on Truth Social. I guess this is not enough truth and it's not social enough for him.
Exactly. He's suddenly without Wi-Fi. No.